Welcome to the Greater Essex County District School Board's presentation on the IPRC process and the Individual Education Plan, the role of the teacher and the IEP school team. The information contained in this presentation is compiled from documents provided by the Ministry of Education and are referred to later in this presentation. Please refer to the Ontario Ministry of Education website for the most up-to-date documents. This is the first in a series of presentations designed to support teachers in understanding the IEP process and writing effective IEPs. The Ministry of Education's Curriculum Resource Guide, Learning for All, tells us that there are 3 practices that every effective classroom should have. They are universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, and tiered interventions. Refer to the strategic wheel for links to additional strategies for universal design for learning and for differentiated instruction. Tiered interventions will be discussed further in this presentation. Through all 3 of these strategies, it is good practice to collect data, observations, and anecdotal comments. This information is an integral part of the IPRC process as it will help to guide instruction and to develop next steps for the student to succeed. Within the Greater Essex County District School Board, a student does not immediately enter the IPRC process at the first sign of academic struggle. The process begins with Tier 1. Only after all 3 tiers of intervention have been implemented or the school student support team has verified that all criteria has been met do we proceed to IPRC. Let's take a closer look at the tiered approach to intervention. The cognitive processes that affect learning and reaching every student handouts are board-generated pamphlets that contain strategies that are designed to support students with different learning styles and learning profiles. These documents include this chart, which explains what intervention looks like at each tier. Tier 1 is where the process begins. These strategies will be successful for 80% of your students. Tier 2 is flexible, needs-based small group instruction. These strategies will be successful for 15 to 20% of your students. Tier 3 is intensive, individualized, and explicit instruction. This will be the case for 5% of your students. Tier 1 is where the process begins. Strategies used in this tier are effective whole classroom instruction, differentiated instructional practices, and classroom benchmark assessments. Continued data collection, assessment, evaluation, and observation will indicate if the student is being successful at this tier. Student progress is reported to parents. Ongoing communication and partnership between home and school will provide consistency for the student. Informal supports through the LST, PLC, Special Education Services, and Special Assignment teachers can also be accessed by the classroom teacher to determine the most effective way to proceed for this student. If the data collected for 6 weeks indicates that the student is not meeting with success, then after discussion and consultation with the school student support team, the student may be moved into Tier 2. An STM, or school team meeting, may be considered as a form of communicating with the parents as well as creating a course of action. Tier 2 is flexible, needs-based small group instruction. Explicit instruction is given based on the strengths and needs indicated by the data collected. Strategic and focused intervention is provided by the classroom teacher with ongoing progress monitoring. Tier 2 is the responsibility of the classroom teacher to provide more focused or precise teaching that some students have not learned thus far. It can be done in small group or individually. Consider where they are struggling. Look at the continuum of learning or scope and sequence of skills and determine where do they need that specific instruction. In order for these skills to be developed, we need to look at the frequency, number of times per week, duration, length of intervention, intensity, strength of the intervention, when practicing these skills. These will be adjusted based on the needs of the student. In your classroom, what could that look like? LST involvement may occur during Tier 2. At this point, the LST may work directly with the student in a small group in the classroom or withdrawn to the LST room. There should be consultation and collaboration between the teacher and the LST in both Tier 1 and Tier 2 for the purpose of planning effective strategies. Tier 3 is intensive, individualized, and explicit instruction. The students are not responding to the interventions of Tier 1 and Tier 2. Another school-based team meeting with parents should be held, discussion about the need for more intensive, individualized instruction, and possible next steps discussed. At this point, the LST may consult with Special Education Services to determine if further school assessment are warranted. Data from the school assessments will be used to determine if possible consultation with psychological services is necessary. If a psychological assessment is completed by either school board personnel or privately outside the board, the results are reviewed by the Special Education Services to determine if there is sufficient data to bring it forward to an IPRC, which stands for an Identification Placement Review Committee. An IPRC is a formal meeting with strict guidelines directed by the Ministry of Education. These guidelines pertain to how an IPRC is initiated, the IEP, or Individual Education Plan, that must be developed as a result of the IPRC, what parts of the IPRC need to be included in the IEP, and when a non-identified IEP should be developed. Following a psychological assessment, board or private, the information from the assessment is used to determine if there is evidence to support an identification as indicated by the Ministry of Education. At this time, the principal and/or parent can call an IPRC meeting. The IPRC meeting formally determines the I, the identification or exceptionality, and the P, the placement. The Ministry newsletter, Supporting the Ontario Leadership Strategy, Principals Want to Know, offer a concise description of the IPRC and IEP process. This document, issue number 12, February 2012, is available on the Ontario Ministry of Education website for your further review. The Ministry of Education also offers special education website links for your future reference. Regulation 181/98 requires that all students that are identified through the IPRC process have an individual education plan, or IEP. This IEP may include accommodations, modifications, and/or alternative expectations. An IEP is developed for each student who has been identified as exceptional by an IPRC. The IEP is a legal requirement for the exceptional student. The IEP must be developed within 30 school days from the student's identification and placement date. It also denotes strengths, needs, assessment information, accommodations, modifications, and/or alternative expectations. An IEP is a working document. Teachers are responsible to develop and implement the IEP under the direction of the principal. It is not optional. As mentioned in the previous slide, once a student has been formally identified through the IPRC, they must have an IEP. An IEP may also be developed for a student not formally identified, but who is deemed by the board to require special education services. These types of IEPs are called non-identified IEPs, and they are created only after consultation with the school administration and educational coordinator. The Ministry of Education created an IEP resource guide in 2004. The link is also available on the Ministry of Education website. This resource guide contains step-by-step detail required when writing an IEP, and it provides definitions and examples for all areas of the IEP. Please be advised that at the time of this recording, an updated IEP resource guide is anticipated from the Ministry of Education. Please refer to the Ministry of Education website for the availability of this new resource. The IEP is a working document that identifies specific accommodated, modified, or alternative expectations for a student based on their individual strengths and needs. It is also an accountability tool for administration, teachers, and ESS staff who have responsibilities under the plan for helping the student meet the stated goals and learning expectations as the student progresses through the Ontario curriculum. An IEP contains information that is relevant and necessary for the individual student to be successful for the current academic year. This information is included in a variety of mandatory areas, such as detailed expectations that are assessed and reported on the ministry report card, teaching strategies necessary for the individual student to reach the stated expectations, specific accommodations for the individual student's learning profile, a transition plan that is also individualized and based on the need of the student, a communication log where communication between home and school is documented throughout the academic year whenever conversations about the student's IEP occurs. To further understand the function of an IEP, it can be clarified by defining what it is not. It is not a description of everything that will be taught to the student. It is not a list of all the teaching strategies used in regular classroom instruction. It is also not a document that records all learning expectations, including those that are not modified from the regular grade level curriculum expectations. And finally, it is not a daily lesson plan. The IEP Development Team may include a variety of people. It may include the classroom teacher or teachers, the LST, school staff such as the behavior specialist or ESS. Other professionals that work within our schools to support student learning, such as the speech and language pathologist, social worker, and educational coordinator, may also consult in the development of the IEP. Consultation with parents is also an important part of developing an IEP. This team may change based on the individual needs of the student. As discussed previously, a non-identified IEP may only be developed after consultation with your school's educational coordinator and administration. Consultation occurs only if a student has gone through the tiered process and, number 1, recommendation has been made to psychological services for a consult. Number 2, psychological services has reviewed the consent for consultation and has signed off on a Form 4 for service. Number 3, parents are in agreement with the psychological assessment. Finally, non-identified IEPs may also be created for C claims, which may include FM systems or occupational and physiotherapy claims. The process begins with the gathering of information, which sets the direction of the IEP. Next, developing the IEP as it relates to the student's special education program and services. The IEP is then implemented, reviewed, and updated during each reporting period or as needed. Remember, it is a working document. Finally, the process is repeated. When developing an IEP for a student, a decision will need to be made if curriculum will be accommodated or modified in each academic area. What is the difference between these two terms? An accommodation assists the student in achieving the grade level expectations. For example, this could mean extended time, use of a scribe, handouts of notes, etc. A modification changes the grade level curriculum expectations of the subject area and/or decreases the number or complexity of the expectations. Accommodations are strategies, supports, and/or services that help students to access the curriculum and demonstrate learning. Accommodations may be for instruction, environment, and/or assessment. They should be unique to the individual student, specific and minimal in number. More does not mean better. An accommodation assists the student in achieving the grade level expectation but does not impact the integrity of the subject or course. The student will still meet the curriculum requirements. The Education for All ministry document defines modified curriculum as subjects and courses from the Ontario curriculum in which the student requires modified expectations, expectations that differ in some way from the regular grade expectations. Typically, modifications in language and math are based on knowledge and skills at a different grade level, however, may include a reduction in grade level expectations. All other subjects typically involve changing the number and/or complexity of regular grade level expectations. Alternative expectations are developed to help students to acquire knowledge and skills that are not represented in the Ontario curriculum. Alternative expectations are used for alternative programs, such as gains in elementary, and for alternative courses, K courses, for steps and maps in secondary. This might also include subject pages related to behavior, social-emotional, self-help, physical, or learning skills. Students with a behavior exceptionality must have a subject page to address the exceptionality. What is the responsibility of the classroom teacher? The classroom teacher provides information during the gathering stage, that is, assessment, background, and student work samples. The classroom teacher writes IEP subject pages, including modified expectations, using the ACT model. They develop strategies and assessment methods that align with each expectation. They are the key curriculum expert on how the IEP can be developed to help the student progress. The classroom teacher collaborates with the in-school team in the IEP process as necessary. They plan and carry out instructional program for the student, and they maintain ongoing communication with parents and school staff, and they record any communication with the parent on the IEP. The principal establishes the in-school team, ensures that the IEPs are completed within 30 school days, and ensures that the IEPs are implemented, evaluated, and updated at least once per reporting period. It is important to note that IEPs are only required to be signed in September. Parents are not signing that they are in agreement with the IEP, but rather that they have received the IEP and that they had the opportunity to consult in the development of the IEP. The LST collaborates in the IEP process by consulting with the classroom teacher regarding diagnostic assessment results. They help to determine the student's strengths and needs as per the IPRC statement, assist with program modifications and/or accommodations, and provide advice about materials and resources. The classroom teacher is responsible for the direction of the student learning. The educational support staff help the student with learning activities and assist with providing appropriate accommodations as described in the IEP. They monitor and record the student's achievement and progress relative to the expectations described in the IEP as determined by the teacher. They also maintain ongoing communication with all the students' teachers as they are part of the collaborative approach amongst the IEP team. DSWs can also develop and implement the program for students in consultation with the classroom teacher and the IEP team. When following an effective IEP, students will start to see success and gains in their learning. So when can we discontinue the IEP? No teacher should choose to discontinue the IEP alone. It should not be discontinued without consulting the IEP team. Further assessment needs to be conducted. Parents, school staff, and other professionals must be consulted. Once all this information is available, then the IEP team will decide if there is a need to continue with modifications or accommodations. By law, every IPRC student must have an IEP. Here are a couple of helpful links when writing IEPs. We hope that you will find this presentation helpful when writing an IEP. Please view the next presentation in this series on writing meaningful, measurable, and manageable goals and expectations. Thank you.